Happy Friday to all you folks listening here and at the Mads and Bad show. Just me and Ant this afternoon because we got a little special something cooked up for you. We're going to be doing a little draft today, the top New York sports villains of all time. So, and we kind of were texting about this past weekend about you know different topics and ideas for the pod. And I was sitting there watching Lakers Celtics with my dad, and every time LeBron touched the ball, you could hear the Celtic fans booing him from the crowd. And I thought to myself, man, I wonder where LeBron James ranks all time as a Boston sports villain. And then I was like, that's a great podcast idea. Do a little fun like draft, or we're both New York sports fans. We've been harmed by other athletes and general managers and owners in our time as fans. So why not pick our favorites or least favorites of all these guys that have just antagonized our teams over the years?
And no real city does it like New York, Charlie. When you talk about villains, like the main thing that comes to my mind is like Reggie Miller, 93 of the Eastern Conference semis, going up against Spike Lee, the show. Like the most iconic, like rivalry, heated, villainy moments come when a team is going up against New York. I think that's that or LA. Like those two cities are the ones that I feel like are like the biggest, you get the biggest villains against. So New York ones, I'm kind of excited to go through this because New York media, when you make a villain of the New York media and the New York fans, you never hear the end of it.
He's on the list right now. Trae Young, who I don't think I'll be picking because we're not going to make it that far down the list, but one playoff series against the Knicks. One turned him into a villain. He doesn't even like have as good stats or a record post that series against the Knicks. But to this day, in the playoffs last year, MSG was still chanting "fuck Trae Young." So that just goes to show you how much of an impact a guy can have on a city, like you said, in the New York sports media market, where all it takes is one moment, one game, one series, and they're going to hate you for the rest of their life. So,
But
without much further
yeah, so
ado, you want to get to it, or
yeah, you want first pick?
um, I'll take first pick because it's going to be a little like half controversial. Okay,
Mm.
so my biggest New York sports villain of all time is Tom Brady, and I know that's going to sound crazy because only three or two of Tom Brady's three Super Bowl losses came to the New York Giants, right? But I'm coming at this as a New York Jets fan. So Tom Brady, 31-8 all time versus the Jets, 9,500 passing yards, 64 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions in 39 games. Regular season and playoffs. He kicked the crap out of us for years, kept us down below in the bottom of the AFC East for years. But I think you ask any Jet fan born past the year 1995, 96, they're going to tell you that they hate Tom Brady. I'm one of those people. Can't stand him. Still can't stand him. And for me, he's probably my biggest sports villain of all time.
You know the famous side talk video where the F Trey Young video, iconic.
Yep.
Even in that video, they say F Tom Brady. That just goes to
Yep.
show you Tom Brady is just an enemy of New York. That's why it's so. I get what you're saying. Like the Giants beat him twice, but it's a saga in New York. Like you're gonna have
Yeah.
the New York teams that take him down. You're gonna have the New York teams that rise up and beat him, but you're also gonna have the New York teams that lose to him a lot. And that's what makes it like such a heated head-to-head rivalry between the city of New York and Tom Brady. But I like the pick, Charlie. I don't know if I would go first overall. I feel like that's. I know it's the Jet fan in you. I know it is the Jet
I had
fan
a
in you.
little personal bias had to leak into this at some point. You
I
know what
mean,
I'm
it's
saying?
that I don't hate it. No, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I'm gonna let my personal bias show here with the first pick, David Ortiz. Okay.
Nice. I was hoping you get some baseball stuff in
No,
here
yeah,
because
no,
I'm
David.
not too well versed. So yeah, go for it.
There's a lot of guys you can go with here in the baseball direction. You have David Ortiz, right, who's a known Yankee killer over the years. Just iconic home run after iconic home run. 2004, the comeback. He was fantastic in that series. And in the regular season, his numbers against the Yankees are absolutely ridiculous. For that reason, I think David Ortiz, and he's also made a villain of it too. He mocks the Yankees all the time now in his job at Fox. He loves to get in the face of Derek Jeter when the Red Sox win over the Yankees or the Red Sox make a good move. And he's just the quintessential Red Sox hero that Yankee fans can just attest. And there's so many you can go with here, right? Like you got Pedro Martinez, which you know the story in '04 when he threw poor Don Zimmer to the ground at 83 years old. So Pedro could have been a guy that you could have gone there. Jose Altuve, another guy you could go in there and say, he's made a enemy of the Yankees and them. On the Mets side, you can go Chase Utley. Remember back in the 15 World Series when he took out Ruben Tejada, dirty slide. Mets fans still haven't forgiven him for that. You could have gone so many different directions here for a New York baseball enemy, but for me, I have to go David Ortiz. It makes the most sense for me.
Was he on that 04 team?
He was. He hit a couple of big home runs in that series too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like you said, in his more recent career ventures over at Fox, whenever he's at that desk, and I was watching the playoffs last year, he took any opportunity he could get to take a shot at the Yankees, he would take it, and he's playing into it now. Good for him. Big Poppy, great pick there, Ant. Great pick. All right, so for my round 2 selection, I'm going back-to-back goats here. Michael Jordan, I have to pick as one of the biggest New York sports villains of all time. 43-17 all time versus the Knicks. 31.6 points per game, 5.8 rebounds, 4.8 assists, 5-0 in playoff series. Kept the Knicks out of the NBA Finals a handful of times, and the only time the Knicks got there in the 90s was those 2 years where he retired, where they actually got there once and then, of course, lost the year after. But Michael Jordan, every time that they were up against Patrick Ewing and those guys in the playoffs, it was always a big deal. I mean, there was a whole section of The Last Dance dedicated to Jordan versus the Knicks. And even if he was in Atlantic City till 6 a.m. the day before, he was still coming to whoop the Knicks in the Garden. And Michael Jordan, one of the biggest New York Knicks villains of all time. I strongly believe, if not for Jordan, Ewing probably would have had maybe a ring and maybe another finals appearance or two.
I mean, he did have 2 in his career. He had 93 when Mike was gone, and also 99 when they were the 8th seed that went all the way. And Mike was I wouldn't even call him the New York villain. He was just the villain of the NBA in that time. Like, everybody got a piece of Mike in that time period, and Mike would just whoop the floor with them. And the Knicks definitely were one of the teams that were at the forefront of that. They faced him, 3 times in the 90s?
In playoff series, they faced him 5 times.
In the 90s?
In the 90s, yeah.
That's crazy.
And of course, the Bulls themselves were 5-1 because the Knicks beat them in '94. That was the obviously the Scottie Pippen game, if you remember that, where he refused to go in.
Yep.
Kukoc made the 3 to extend the series, but the Knicks were able to win, I think, in 6 or 7. So.
And then they went to the finals that year and lost to Houston.
Houston, yep.
And that was the OJ chase. That year, the Knicks, man. That was go New York, go New York, go.
We're back in the Knicks of hardcore. Yeah. All right, yeah.
Nick, one of Charlie's favorite songs. We love that song for you, Charlie.
Fantastic stuff, man.
Second pick, I'm going to go very recent. Saquon.
Had to.
I think
he was next to my list.
If we were talking football villains of New York, Saquon has to be at the top of the list. Iconic Giant. Had some of the best rushing years in Giants history with the Big Blue when they had some of their worst offensive lines. And then goes to their most hated rival, the Philadelphia Eagles. And not only that, wins a Super Bowl in his first year with them. And almost an MVP, a 2,000-yard rusher as well. Saquon Barkley has left a sour taste in the mouths of Giants fans for life. Even if he comes back and maybe wins a Super Bowl with the Giants, I still think the relationship will never be the same between the Giants and Saquon.
Yeah, it'll never be the same. And the fact that he was able to win Offensive Player of the Year this year, in the one game that Saquon played against the Giants this year, because obviously the second time they put him in bubble wrap because they didn't want him getting hurt before the playoffs, but 17 carries, 176 yards and a touchdown. Yes, if Saquon had gone anywhere else, I think the Giants fans would have been rooting for him. But because he chose Philly, there's going to be some vitriol there for the rest of his career. Absolutely. And, as a Jets fan, we went through this semi-similar kind of thing with Darrelle Revis. They traded him to the Bucks, and then the year after, as a free agent, he went to the Patriots and won the Super Bowl there. But definitely not as high profile as a transaction as the Saquon Barkley was. Saquon Barkley one was for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Giants. So hard to argue with you there. He was my number 3 after MJ. But because you took Saquon, I got to move somebody up from number 4. and that is former Knicks general manager / coach Isaiah Thomas. Now, Isaiah did a whole lot of terrible things when he was here in New York. Honestly, this podcast would probably be an hour long if we had to go down and go through each and every mistake and everything he did along the way, including having to settle some sexual assault conduct cases and whatnot. But just in terms of basketball, transactionally, building around Stephon Marbury was not a great idea. He was in the back half of his career. Trading Penny Hardaway and Trevor Ariza for Steve Francis, who they would eventually have to trade Zach Randolph to get off that contract. Um, Signing Jared Jeffries to a $30 million contract, who had never even averaged more than 5 points per game in his career at that point. What else we got here? Using a first round draft pick on Ronaldo Balkman. You know who that is, Ant? Does that name ring a bell? Great. So, and then by the time he got to the end of his rope as the general manager / president of the Knicks, James Dolan had him step up and be the head coach because he was like, listen, you made this mess. Now you go fix it. And in Isaiah Thomas's 2 years as the head coach of the Knicks, they didn't make the playoffs, and he had a record of 56 and 108. Just awful, awful stuff. And Isaiah Thomas will always and forever be hated in the city of New York because of those things. I was between him and Phil Jackson here. Now, Phil Jackson made his own fair share of mistakes, but Isaiah Thomas was just around so much longer and for no reason. So I'm going with Isaiah here. Great player on the court.
There's so many options I can go with here with this last pick. Like I'm just kind of mulling it over. Like on here, you have Tiki Barber, right? Tiki Barber.
Yeah.
You talk about sour endings and bad endings with the team. What he said with Eli out the door, then Eli win the Super Bowl the very next season. You got the recent one, Freddie Freeman, who went crazy in the World Series against the Yankees this past season.
And against the Mets in the series before.
And the Mets in the series before.
NLCS.
You have Kyrie Irving on here. And not only did Kyrie Irving piss off one New York basketball team, he pissed off two in his time in the NBA. When he went to Brooklyn in free agency and completely was telling the Knicks the entire time in that offseason, you're the favorite, you're the favorite, you're the favorite. Only they would get the price up in Brooklyn and go to Brooklyn. And then, of course, the whole shenanigans that were going on in Brooklyn at the time when he was doing all those crazy antics, sitting out of games, and then forcing his way out to go to Dallas. Kyrie's definitely a great option that I can go with here. But what did I say in the beginning, Charlie?
You said,
what is one of the most iconic moments in the history of New York sports?
9 points in 9 seconds.
9 points in 9 seconds, Miller. The younger brother of Cheryl, going absolutely nuts to knock off the Knicks, looks over at one of the greatest directors of all time in Spike Lee, one of the most iconic Knicks fans, and went, choke. For that moment alone, the coldness, the straight killer mentality, that one moment made him an absolute detestable figure in the city of New York City. And for that reason, I know it's only one moment, but Reggie Miller is my third pick.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and Knicks fans still hate Reggie Miller to this day, as I'll reference the playoffs from last year once again. We heard, and after, I think it was either game 1 or game 2, Reggie Miller was on the call for Knicks Pacers in the Garden, and they were saying, fuck you, Reggie. And then Josh Hart comes over and he goes, Reggie, I think they're saying, fuck you. It was just fantastic stuff. Now, obviously, of course, all that stuff came back to bite the Knicks in the ass because, some injuries popped up and we lost that series in 7. But hey, if I'm not mistaken, the Knicks won that in the 9 points in 9 seconds. That was game 1 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. I want to say the Knicks went on to win that series.
Did they?
I'm not mistaken.
No, I think the Pacers ended up going to the Eastern Conference Finals that year and losing to Mike.
I think it might have been the year after they got their revenge on Reggie. So you're probably right. But yeah. just an absolutely iconic moment in terms of New York sports. And you still see that. You'll see that Reggie picture on T-shirts today, man.
It's one of the most cold-blooded moments in the history of basketball, and made him an enemy of New York for life. One moment. I know it's only one moment. I know a lot of these guys have whole sagas as to why they're villains. Reggie Miller, for one moment, made him one of the biggest villains in New York sports history, and that's why he has to be on this list. Iconic.
Oh, a fantastic pick, yeah, for sure. That's three rounds each from us, or 3 picks each from us right there. Any honorable mentions you want to shout out real quick, Ant, before we pop off?
I mean, I shouted out Kyrie. I think he definitely needs a special. Pedro Martinez, of course, for what he did with Don Zimmer and when he was with the Red Sox. That moment was crazy. I know we talked about Tiki Barber a little bit, but some guys that I think, even though they're technically villains, I don't want to call them villains. Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, guys who've just underperformed over the years. Like, I don't want to call those guys villains just because they underperformed. That's not fair to them. I just think, like, a villain needs to be like an actual, like, detestable figure in my eyes,
or an opponent. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Like Aaron Rodgers, you could have made a case for him to be on this list, because if you ask any Jet fan anywhere, I would probably wager to guess that they can't stand him. But it's not like he came here with like ill intentions. He came here to try and do something. It just didn't work out. You know what I mean? Same thing goes for those guys you just mentioned.
What about you, Charlie? Any honorable mentions for you? You want to talk about dishonorable mentions?
Adam Gase, Richie Kotite, some Jets coaches that were absolutely horrendous. I touched on Phil Jackson. We don't have to.
Phil
we don't
Jackson's
have to go.
got multiple reasons as to why.
Multiple?
And because he was the coach of the Bulls when he beat them all throughout the 90s.
There you go.
And then also destroying them as the GM.
He signed Lamar Odom, who was on crack.
Iconic Stephen A. Smith moment.
Iconic first take moment. All right, Ant, that was fun as hell. I think we should definitely do this again next week, but with a different city.
That might be a recurring gag here on this little sideshow we got going on. We'll probably post a graphic of our three picks. Let us know what you guys think. Tell us if there's any other New York sports villains that you know about that you'd like to share with us and think that are better than the 3 we picked.
But yeah, there any like I'm sure there's some like Rangers villains out there that we don't know. Yeah, so we weren't able to touch on that, but yeah, if there's anything we missed, please let us know.
At Maz and Bads.
On TikTok, on Instagram, Google it on Spotify, Google it on the internet. You'll probably find a buttload of podcast sites that I don't even know about that we're somehow on because of this website I use. It's great. It's fantastic.
We'll see you next time.